The setting sun bathed the courtyard of the Grand Burbank Hotel in golden light, where 200 guests dressed in exquisite attire had gathered. The wedding of Tavon Brooks and Zenai Whitley was not merely the union of two lovers. It was a fusion of influence, wealth, and ambition. Above the white silk and crystal canopy hung an elegant plaque engraved in gold, Brooks and Whitley, May 25, 2025. Tavon Brooks, a tall 27-year-old man with a neatly trimmed beard, stood at the altar in an ivory suit. His cybersecurity startup had recently attracted $80 million in investment, and Forbes magazine had included him in its 30 under 30 list. But today, his eyes, usually focused and analytical, were shining with happiness. In the front row sat his father, Obadiah Brooks, in an immaculate dark blue suit. A widower who had lost his wife 15 years ago, he had turned a small construction company into the Burbank real estate empire. At 48, he looked younger, fit, with a touch of gray at his temples that only added to his nobility. The music changed, and all heads turned toward the front of the room. Zenai Whitley appeared in a dress that seemed to be made of moonlight and dreams. A 25-year-old rising star in architecture, she attracted attention not only for her beauty but also for her sharp mind. Her latest project, an eco-friendly complex in the center of Burbank, had won a national award, and many whispered that the Brooks family's influence was behind her success. "She's beautiful," someone whispered. And it was true. Tall with flawless dark amber skin and expressive eyes, Zenai moved with the grace of a dancer. Her dress, created by a famous designer, accentuated every curve of her figure, and her intricate hairstyle, woven with pearls, made her look like a queen. When Zenai approached the altar, Tavon took her hand, and for a moment, it seemed as if the whole world held its breath. They exchanged vows, his voice firm and confident, hers melodic and tender. When the priest declared them husband and wife, the crowd erupted in applause, and fireworks lit up the sky. At the reception, Obadiah Brooks gave a touching toast. "To my son and his beautiful bride. You are both the most precious things in my life." No one noticed how, for a split second, Obadiah and Zenai's eyes met over their champagne glasses, and a spark flew between them that had nothing to do with family affection. The celebration continued late into the night. Tavon and Zenai danced, accepted congratulations, and cut a 6-tier cake. The photographer tirelessly snapped away, capturing every moment of happiness that seemed to have no end. Around midnight, the newlyweds left the party under a shower of rice grains and rose petals. They went up to the hotel's presidential suite, a 2-story apartment with a panoramic view of Burbank at night. "Mrs. Brooks," Tavon whispered as the elevator doors closed, leaving them alone for the first time all day. "It sounds strange, but I like it," Zenai smiled, pressing herself against his chest. "So what now, Mr. Brooks?" Now we have our whole lives ahead of us." They entered the room, where champagne on ice, chocolate-covered strawberries, and a bed strewn with rose petals awaited them. Tavon closed the door, and the world outside ceased to exist. At 8 o'clock in the morning, maid Letitia James knocked on the door of the presidential suite. There was no answer. She waited a minute and knocked again. Louder. Silence. Letitia used her key card. The newlyweds had ordered early breakfast and housekeeping, and she didn't want to let them down. The living room looked untouched. The champagne was unopened. The strawberries, untouched. Letitia frowned and called out, "Good morning, room service." There was no answer. She went up to the second floor of the suite, where the bedroom was located. The door was ajar. Letitia's scream echoed throughout the floor. Detective Ezra Delano arrived at the scene 40 minutes after the call. A tall, 41-year-old man with closely cropped hair and piercing eyes. He moved with the confidence of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. His black suit fit him perfectly, despite the early hour and the rush. "What do we have here?" he asked, showing his badge to the officer guarding the entrance to the presidential suite. "Zenai Whitley Brooks, 25 years old. Found dead this morning by the maid. Presumed suicide," replied the young officer, glancing at his notebook. Delano nodded and entered the room. Waiting for him upstairs was medical examiner Nia Delano, the ex-wife of his late brother. Despite their family ties, their relationship remained strictly professional. "Ezra," she nodded, a slender woman of 38, with her hair pulled back in a tight bun and dressed in a white coat. She always radiated calm, even at the most horrific crime scenes. "Nia, what do you think?" At first glance, it looks like an overdose. An empty sleeping pill bottle and a half-empty glass of wine were found next to the body. There are no signs of decomposition, so death occurred between 1 o'clock and 3 a.m., I would guess. Delano looked around the room. Zenai lay on the bed, still in her wedding dress. Her eyes were closed, and a faint smile played on her lips, as if she had fallen asleep with happy thoughts. But Delano knew how deceptive death could be. "Where's the husband?" he asked, putting on latex gloves. "In the next room. He was found in the hallway early this morning, heavily intoxicated. He doesn't remember anything after midnight." Delano raised an eyebrow. Convenient amnesia. He began his examination, moving methodically, not missing a single detail. Something didn't add up here. He could feel it in his gut. Zenai's phone was on the bedside table. Delano turned it on. The screen wasn't locked. The last message came at 12:30 a.m. "Everything went perfectly. Can't wait to see you tomorrow." Oh? Who's that?" Delano muttered. He continued his examination and noticed several oddities. First, Zenai's hands were folded too neatly for someone dying of an overdose. Second, on her neck, almost hidden by the high collar of her dress, there were faint bruises, possibly finger marks. "Nia, look here," he said, pointing to the victim's neck. The medical examiner leaned over, carefully pulled back the collar, and frowned. "This changes things. We need to do a full autopsy. But I'd say these marks look like strangulation." Delano nodded. Suicide is looking less and less likely. He noticed another detail. The nail on Zenai's right index finger was broken, as if she had been clutching or fighting something. There were traces of something dark under her fingernails. "We need to take samples from under the nails," he said to Nia. "Already done," she replied. "The results will be in later today." Delano knelt down to examine the floor around the bed. In the corner, partially hidden by a heavy curtain, he noticed a tiny scrap of fabric, the same shade of ivory as Tavon's suit. "Interesting," he muttered, carefully placing his find in an evidence bag. After completing his examination of the crime scene, Delano went down to the room where Tavon Brooks was being held. The young man sat on the edge of the bed, hunched over, his eyes red from crying. His once impeccable suit was rumpled, and there was a stain on his sleeve, possibly from wine. "Mr. Brooks, I'm Detective Ezra Delano. I'm very sorry for your loss, but I need to ask you a few questions." Tavon looked up, his eyes filled with genuine grief. "I don't understand what happened. We were so happy. Why did she do it?" "We're not sure yet if it was suicide, Mr. Brooks. Could you tell me what happened last night, after you left the wedding reception?" Tavon ran his hand over his face. "We went up to our room around midnight. We were so happy. We opened the champagne and started. Well, you know, it was our wedding night. And then, I don't remember. I must have had too much to drink at the reception. The last thing I remember is us toasting to our future. And then, Nothing. I woke up in the hallway with a security guard shaking me by the shoulder. And then they told me that Zenai. His voice broke. Delano watched Tavon closely. His grief seemed genuine. But something in his story didn't add up. How did he end up in the hallway? Why couldn't he remember anything after midnight? Mr. Brooks, did your wife have any enemies? Maybe problems at work? Or in her personal life? Tavon shook his head. No. Everyone loved Zenai. She was a ray of sunshine. Talented, ambitious, but kind. I can't imagine anyone wanting to hurt her. What about you? Do you have any enemies? I work in cybersecurity, detective. Of course, there are people who aren't thrilled about my job. But what does that have to do with anything? Zenai killed herself. Delano noticed how Tavon's tone changed with his last words, as if he were trying to convince not only the detective, but also himself. We're looking into all possibilities, Mr. Brooks. One more question. Do you know anyone whose name starts with O? Someone your wife might have been in contact with. Tavon frowned. No, I can't think of anyone. Why do you ask? Just checking the details. Thank you for your time, Mr. Brooks. Please don't leave town anytime soon. We may have more questions. As he left the room, Delano bumped into Obadiah Brooks. Tavon's father looked exhausted, but dignified. Detective, I'm Obadiah Brooks, Tavon's father. Is there any news? Is my son? Is he okay? Mr. Brooks, your son is in shock, but he is physically unharmed. We are investigating the circumstances surrounding his wife's death. This is a terrible tragedy. Zenai was special. I don't understand why she would do such a thing. Delano looked closely at Obadiah. Mr. Brooks, did you know your daughter-in-law well? Something flashed in Obadiah's eyes. Anxiety, fear, but it quickly disappeared. Of course, detective. Zenai worked on projects for my company. She was a talented architect and would have been a wonderful addition to our family. Delano noticed how Obadiah nervously adjusted his tie. His fingers were trembling slightly. Mr. Brooks, where were you between 1 o'clock and 3 a.m. today? Obadiah straightened up. I left the reception around 11 o'clock in the evening and returned home. I live alone, so there are no witnesses. But the security guard at my complex can confirm the time of my return. I see. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. We'll keep you informed of the investigation. When Obadiah left, Delano took out his phone and dialed a number. I need information on all calls and messages from Zenai Whitley Brooks' phone for the last month. And please, check if there have been any contacts between her and Obadiah Brooks, other than work meetings. Something told him that the letter O in Zenai's last message had something to do with Obadiah Brooks. And if that was the case, then the happy wedding might have been hiding much darker secrets than anyone could have imagined. Rain drummed on the roof of the morgue, providing an ominous accompaniment to the coroner's work. Nia Delano finished the last stitch on Zenai Whitley Brooks' body and removed her blood-stained gloves. Ezra Delano stood against the wall, his face impassive, though inside he was reeling. Even after so many years on the police force, he still couldn't get used to the sight of young women on the autopsy table. Well, he asked, as Nia walked over to the sink to wash her hands. It's definitely not suicide, she replied, carefully lathering her fingers. The cause of death is asphyxiation due to strangulation. There are clear finger marks on the neck, consistent with a male hand. Sleeping pills were found in the blood, but not in a concentration high enough to cause death. Delano nodded. So someone strangled her and tried to make it look like an overdose. Exactly. And there's something else. Nia approached the microscope. We found fabric fibers and skin particles under her fingernails. We're still analyzing the DNA, but the fibers are identical to the material of Tavon Brooks' suit. She fought back, Delano said thoughtfully. Yes, and quite desperately. There are bruises on the inside of her wrists. She was held down, with her arms pinned to the bed. Judging by the location of the bruises, the attacker was taller and stronger than the victim. The detective looked at Zenai's body. Even in death, she retained a strange beauty. Time of death: between 1:30 and 2:15 a.m. No earlier, no later. Any signs of sexual contact? Nia shook her head. None. If they were planning a wedding night, they didn't get that far. Delano rubbed his chin thoughtfully. So, the newlyweds go up to their room around midnight. Less than 2 hours later, the bride is dead, and the groom is found drunk in the hallway, remembering nothing. Too convenient, don't you think? We can't arrest someone for too convenient. Ezra, Nia gave him a stern look. We need evidence. And we'll find it. Back at the police station, Delano delved into Zenai Whitley's past. He laid out photos, social media printouts, resumes, and articles about her architectural projects on the table. Zenai grew up in Compton, in a middle-class family. Her father was a bus driver, and her mother was a schoolteacher. She got excellent grades in school, won a scholarship to the University of California, Los Angeles, and graduated with honors in architecture. And then, her meteoric rise began. 3 years ago, she got a job as a junior architect at Brooks Development and almost immediately got the opportunity to work on large projects. A year later, Zenai was already leading her own team, and her projects were receiving prestigious awards. This was too fast for a novice architect without connections, Delano muttered, looking at a photo of Zenai and Obadiah Brooks at the opening of a new eco-complex. They were standing close together, his arm around her waist. For an employer-employee relationship, it looked a little intimate. Delano dialed Judge Holloway's number. They played basketball together on weekends. James, I need a warrant for the financial transactions of Obadiah Brooks and Zenai Whitley for the last 3 years, and their phone records too. The warrant was ready in an hour. Delano immersed himself in a world of numbers and dates. Within 30 minutes, he found his first lead, monthly transfers from Obadiah's account to Zenai's, which began immediately after she was hired. The amounts were significant, 10 times her official salary. I wonder what services she was providing in exchange for this money. Delano made a note in his notebook. The phone records were even more revealing. Hundreds of messages and calls between them, often late at night or on weekends. Over the past year, the number of contacts had only increased. Delano leaned back in his chair and rubbed his tired eyes. A picture was beginning to emerge, and it was far from the idyllic happy family the Brooks had tried to portray. The next step was to visit the architectural firm where Zenai worked. Fire if this story has you hooked. Don't go anywhere. The real twist is just ahead. Click like, hit subscribe, and turn on the bell icon so you don't miss what happens next. You won't believe how this ends. Fire! The modern glass and concrete building towered over the neighboring structures, befitting the headquarters of Burbank's largest developer. In the spacious lobby, Delano was met by a secretary with tear-stained eyes. The news of Zenai's death had already spread throughout the office. Detective Delano, Burbank Police, he said, showing his badge. I need to speak with Zenai Whitley's colleagues. He was led into a conference room where 5 people had gathered, the deceased's closest colleagues. They all looked devastated, but Delano noticed that one woman, short, with large glasses, seemed more annoyed than sad. Lionel Jones, senior designer, she introduced herself when Delano addressed her. I worked with Zenai for the last 2 years. What was she like as a colleague? The detective asked. Lionel pursed her lips. Officially, talented and hardworking. Unofficially, look, I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but... She lowered her voice. Zenai didn't get projects and promotions because of her talent. She had special access to management. You mean Obadiah Brooks? Lionel nodded. Everyone knew they were in a relationship. They tried to hide it, but unsuccessfully. Private meetings. Business trips together. His arm around her waist at company parties. And suddenly, Zenai's projects were given the green light, while more experienced architects were left out in the cold. And how long had this been going on? From the very beginning. She came here 3 years ago, and within a month, rumors were already circulating. And then, she started dating Tavon. And everyone thought, what a twist. First the father, then the son. Delano wrote the information down in his notebook. Did Tavon know about his father's relationship with Zenai? If he did, he didn't show it. But Zenai? She was a manipulator. She used people to get what she wanted. First Obadiah helped her with her career. Then she switched to Tavon, a young, successful tech genius with millions in the bank. And Obadiah didn't object. Lionel shrugged. Who knows what was going on in their heads? Maybe it was some kind of twisted power game. All I know is that Zenai got everything she wanted, using her charm. After interviewing the rest of the colleagues, who mostly confirmed Lionel's story, Delano went to check out another lead. Phone records showed that Obadiah and Zenai often met at the Azure Hotel on the outskirts of Burbank. The hotel manager initially refused to cooperate, but quickly changed his tone when he saw the warrant. He confirmed that Mr. Brooks regularly booked a suite on the top floor under the name Smith, and always arrived with his niece, a young black woman matching Zenai's description. The last time they were here? Let me think. 3 days ago. The day before the wedding, the manager said, looking through the records. Did they seem tense? Delano asked. No. On the contrary, very close, if you know what I mean. Delano understood. The picture was becoming increasingly grim. Back at the station, he received a message from the tech department. They had managed to recover the deleted messages from Zenai's phone. Most of them were from Obadiah, who signed off with just the letter O. The content ranged from business discussions to openly intimate confessions. The last message was sent at 12:30 a.m. on the night of the murder. Everything went perfectly. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. Oh. Zenai's reply? Me too. We need to be careful. T doesn't suspect anything. Soon, we'll be able to be together openly. I love you. Z. Delano cursed. It seemed that Zenai had planned to continue her relationship with Obadiah even after her wedding to his son. This gave Tavon a powerful motive for murder, if he found out about the betrayal. But how could he have found out? And when exactly? The answer came unexpectedly. Jermaine Parker, the wedding photographer, showed up at the station with information he considered important. I was looking through the photos for the wedding album and noticed something strange. Jermaine opened his laptop and showed a series of photos. Here, around 11 o'clock at night, Tavon went to the bar, and Zenai was talking to his father. The photos showed Obadiah leaning toward Zenai, his hand touching her waist. For a second, their faces were close, too close for the father of the groom. And here, Jermaine opened the next photo. Tavon comes back and sees them. Look at his face. Delano looked closely. Tavon's expression was complex, a mixture of shock, disbelief, and anger, beginning to boil. After that, he and Zenai walked off toward the garden. I didn't follow them. They asked for some privacy. But when they came back about 15 minutes later, the atmosphere between them had changed. They were smiling and holding hands, but it looked forced, like they were acting. What about Obadiah? He was watching them from a distance. He looked concerned. Delano carefully studied all the photos. In one of them, Tavon was holding Zenai's phone. Perhaps that was when he saw the messages from her father. "Thank you, Mr. Parker. You've been very helpful to the investigation." After the photographer left, Delano called in technicians to check Tavon's phone. The results came back quickly, at 12:25, 5 minutes before Obadiah's last message. Tavon's phone had accessed Zenai's messenger account. "He knew," Delano muttered. "He read their messages right before they went up to the room." Now, there was one more detail to check. Delano returned to the Grand Burbank Hotel and requested the surveillance camera footage. The video from the first floor showed Tavon and Zenai entering the elevator around midnight, both smiling and holding hands. But as soon as the doors closed, Tavon's smile disappeared, and his gaze turned icy. A camera in the hallway on the floor of the presidential suite captured Tavon leaving the room at 2:15 a.m. His suit was rumpled, and a dark stain was visible on his sleeve. He walked unsteadily down the hallway, as if drunk, then leaned against the wall and slowly slid to the floor. A security guard found him 20 minutes later and helped him up. Tavon mumbled something, and the guard took him to the next room. A classic setup, Delano shook his head. He's pretending to be really drunk to explain his memory loss. And that dark stain on his sleeve looks like blood, not wine. Back at the station, the detective received the final DNA analysis results. The skin particles under Zenai's fingernails belonged to Tavon Brooks, as did the fabric fibers. The case was taking shape. Delano gathered the whole team for a discussion. "So here's what we have," he said, pointing to the board with the evidence. Zenai Whitley was in a romantic relationship with Obadiah Brooks for at least 3 years. During that time, she received significant career advancement and financial support. Then, she started dating Tavon, Obadiah's son, possibly hoping for even greater benefits, or trying to cover up her relationship with his father. Obadiah didn't mind, asked one of the detectives. Judging by the messages, he was fine with the plan. Maybe they were thinking of getting together officially after Zenai and Tavon got divorced at some convenient time. And Tavon didn't suspect anything. Not until the wedding. But that evening, he noticed something between his father and his bride. Then checked her phone and discovered their correspondence. Imagine that, you've just gotten married, and then you find out that your wife and your father. The motive is obvious, but why didn't he confront them right away? Delano thought for a moment. Maybe he wanted to save face in front of the guests, or he was too shocked. In any case, he waited until they were alone, and then he exploded. Black right arrow #final CTA, end of full script. Move a camera if you were captivated by this tragic tale of love, betrayal, and justice. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss another chilling story from the dark files. Justice may be served, but the scars remain. Move a camera.